This is the Just Ride Snowboard channel. I am Lars Horstman with a little pro tip for you, something to consider when you're venturing out on the journey of finding the perfectly functional stand setup. When you mount your bindings, you're going to realize that in order for the binding angle to change, the binding has to rotate around its center mounting disc. And that mostly happens in 3-degree increments. So the more angle you put on your bindings, the further your toes are moving apart and the further your heels are moving together. Then when you measure your stance width, you'd be measuring from the center of the one disc to the center of the other disc. However, your legs attach to your feet at the heels. And as we just said, the more angle you apply to your bindings, the further your heels move together. On top of that, the more you increase your stance width, the likelier it is that you will also find yourself wanting greater angles, because that is just how our body works. If you consider, if this is my femur bone coming from the hip, as soon as my stance width is greater than the width of my hips, the femur bone's gonna flare out like this and automatically put greater angles on both feet. So when you put all this together, you'll realize that sometimes when you are actually trying to increase your stance width, you might not really have increased the distance between your heels because you've also gone with greater binding angles. And when that happens, you're potentially on the pathway of setting yourself up with too big of a stance width. The bigger takeaway here is the change of the pressure points on heel and toe edge. As you increase the angles, the pressure points on your toe edge move further and further outwards along the edge and further inwards along the heel edge. So snowboards are 99% of the time symmetrical. And if you ask a snowboard how it wants to be ridden most efficiently, with the most even pressure on both edges, it would clearly tell you 0-0. So in that position, you'd be tipping heel to toe and hit the exact same spot to compress the camber and to bend the board into a turn shape. Now, we all know that 0-0 is not a very functional stance. As soon as your stance width surpasses the width of your hips, like you simply need some angle to actually flex all your leg joints somewhat efficiently. And if you consider everything I just tried to explain, this will make you think that it's potentially a good idea to keep the overall angle between both bindings at the smallest comfortable amount. So there are no hard facts on this, but I would suggest if you find yourself hitting an overall binding angle of more than 27 or even more than 30 degrees, you should maybe reconsider your stance width, go a little narrower and reduce the angles of each individual binding. Basically, this is an experience that I'm sharing with you. So I've always ridden more directional binding setups, and back in the day when I used to teach snowboarding, I just because I had to ride switch a whole bunch for demonstration purposes, I kind of just mixed up that large angle front foot with a bit of a duck foot on the back, and I ended up riding 27 degrees on the front foot with -9 on the back at a time when wider stances were like, that was the thing to do. So I was rocking like a 23.5-inch stance with those crazy angles. And if you add up the numbers, that's a total of 36 degrees between both feet, 27 -9. And when I stopped teaching and focused more on my own riding and went down the path of turning and carving, I reflected on this setup with the logic that I just tried to explain here. And I started to bring in my angles while also moving my legs further and further together. So now I'm riding 27 or 30 on the front foot and +6 or +9 on the back foot. So I went from an overall 36 degree to an overall 21 degree while reducing my stance width by about 2 inches. I'm rocking about a 21 to 21.5 inch stance width right now. And when I set this up just to play with it, I found out that basically my heels stayed in the same spot as they were before, but my toes moved substantially closer together. And what I've gained out of this setup change is that I feel like I have much more even pressure on both edges, and also I'm more mobile. Like the narrower stance width allows for me to move my body from front foot to back foot much quicker, simply because the distance between the 2 feet is smaller. Of course, this all depends a little bit on your own body and personal preference, but I do hope that the logic and the biomechanics aspects of the approach that I just laid out make sense to you, and that it will help you to get your stuff dialed in to absolute perfection. That's my little pro tip on stance width and angles, and that's it for today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I think I've only just scratched the surface of where I think this space is going to go, and get the notifications so you don't miss out on what's next. See you out there.